but we're not a monolith as a people, and sort of having more of us in all spaces and is deeply important. I don't understand, the older I get, how we operate in these silos by ourselves. I was only ever taught by one woman of color, and she's gone to a different university. At some point, I applied to that university, and we joked, we're like, well, we're never going to be together. They're not going to have two of us in a room. The energy of having one of us in a room when they're saying something, and the ability, I don't think people really understand. If I'm in a room by myself with other academics and we all have the same title, and we of course want to have these conversations about race, if there's something that I'm saying that they don't like, it often becomes, even unintentionally, if there's 26 people who are not of my race and I'm by myself in that room, the equity of that conversation is not existent. It can't be existent. And I think we believe that it is because I'm in the room, so that then whatever happens, they can say, well, she was in the room when this happened. But the power of having 26 people, being surrounded by 26, 30, 40, 50 people, and you're the only one, and the danger of what it is to have more than one. I mean, we joked about it, my mentor and I didn't end up getting the job, which was specifically written for a person of color. It went to a blonde woman who used to be a student at that institution. But just the shift of power that happens when there are two women of color sitting side by side in a room who can back each other. I've never felt it in academia. I don't know what that feeling would be. It feels dangerous enough when I have an opinion on my own as a person of color in a room. But I do think representation is massively important. And I think about it, I have so many students who've graduated, and all of these, I've had 4 different students who've graduated this program at Ball State, go into the world, and now they're in graduate programs. And within their first 2 weeks, all these graduate programs had the same brilliant idea of taking their largest class of color ever. So like the largest class of color and the largest class of gender fluid bodies, and at least 4 different people before the first month of school had happened said that white professors had stormed out, had told them that the space was unsafe. Because I don't think people understand. I think we all say, okay, we want more students of color, but if you don't provide a foundation, a faculty foundation of people who can serve those kids, who know where they're coming from, there's going to be problems. I just find it's been extraordinary to hear these stories. And they weren't all, 2 of them came from white students who were in a class of traditionally the largest group of students of color that they've ever brought in, but they are also backing their classmates of color and using the exact same language of their classmates of color. And I'm talking tenured professors who are leaving institutions. And like, these are large institutions. These are reputable, large, revered institutions where their entire faculty, the first month at my own alma mater, my graduate school, somebody told the entire class, I feel deeply unsafe, and burst into tears and was like, I don't feel like any of you guys want to learn from me. And the students had said nothing. They were just sitting there. So I think until we deal with representation, and again, to Charmaine's point, and until we understand the community that we're in conversation with, we're not doing our work. I teach acting, and I always talk about.
I think though, we're going to be challenged with having to unpack the systemic racism within all of those settings. You know, the from the racial profiling to the redlining and of resources, you know, to the generational wealth and entitlement that comes with that. To, you know, all of that has to be unpacked.
I mean, truly.
And, you know.
Yeah, just the idea, if all 3 of us were on a faculty together, what that would feel like. I actually think there's so few of my colleagues anywhere, like, and educators anywhere, who know the feeling of being outnumbered. I've grown up feeling outnumbered. I'm a Black woman who's born and raised Hoosier, but I think the sticker shock when you take all these students of standing in a room for the first time as an artist in which more people don't look like you than look like you, I think it's causing real realities are shattering for these people, in a very real way. So until there's more of us everywhere, we are going to continue to have these reckonings. And best case scenario, we all walk out into the sun and we've learned something. And worst case scenario, I think two of the academics I'm talking about at these other institutions have just stepped away. I think one person chose early retirement after receiving their first class of all people of color, and one person has taken a sabbatical. And I think that's wild to me.
My heart is being fueled right now. All of this resonates with me so much that I don't want to get emotional. But I think that it brings me to a recent situation I had with a student that I'm choreographing a solo on, and she's in college now, and she is she's to school, she's studying dance, and she recently had this experience because she is one of the only Black students at the school, and especially in her major, and it was sad to me to hear that she felt that she couldn't express what she wanted to say in fear of not having that support, if that makes sense, because she felt outnumbered. And in the issue she was talking about, it was wrapped in race, about how she felt some students were saying this, and she wanted to go to her professors and be able to speak on the matter, but unfortunately, because she was in the minority and didn't have the backing, and the other group had a bigger following, and they were going up to the office and saying things like this, she felt that she should keep quiet. And I think that in that moment, she was angry. And I realized she was so afraid of the stereotype of the angry Black woman. And she was afraid that if she were to go up to the office and express herself and say what she felt, that it would get brushed off as she's being aggressive, she's not being understanding in this type of setting, in this type of environment. So it brings me to the question of what is the angry Black woman? And I think that for me, I think it's in response to our voices being silenced. But in contrast to that, Audre Lorde, she says that Black woman's anger is acceptable only in the service of other people's salvation or learning. And I realized that made sense to me, because when over the course of this year, when we kind of experienced so much racial, tension in the air, and it was just a lot happening with the police brutality and things like this, that I think people all of a sudden were searching for answers very quickly. And it felt weird because a lot of things that I was saying and speaking on, I was kind of already saying, but I think all of a sudden it was like, here's a microphone, now you tell us what we need to do. And I felt very, I felt uncomfortable because now all of a sudden, because I was expressing so much anger, and I was showcasing this through my social media posts, how I was talking, because I was upset. I was very upset about I'm still upset about the Ahmaud Arbery case when that first happened, and because that's here. I'm from Atlanta, so that just never sat well with me at all, and that kind of it created anger. And I realized that my anger, because I was so angry, people started to listen and say, well, what can we do? What can we do? All of a sudden, what can we do now? I don't know if it's out of guilt or because some people didn't want to, admit that they are not doing the action part of what needs to be said or what needs to be done. But however, my question is, how do you include your anger in your work? Because from my anger and frustration, that's how the Peace, Love, and Dance Project was created. Because I needed to do something I felt that was on the right side of history, or the side of history that I wanted to be on. So my question is, how do you include and celebrate also your anger in your work, I think? And Didi, I think, can start this off this time.
Not in a facetious way. As much as humanly possible and all the time, I guess, is my answer, because Because I think it's a myth. I think it's a myth that has been used to silence us continually. I wrote a piece called No AIDS, No Maids, which talks about this trope of the magical Negro and the magical queer. And I talk about image addiction. And I think for so long, the only image of the Black woman was sort of mammy. Everybody expects you to mammy them. They expect you no matter, and whatever that is, right? You's kind, you smart, you was brilliant, from the help to Hattie. This image of us as sort of caretakers, of matronly caretakers, and we all know that, like, no matter what happens, no matter what happens, we're supposed to embrace you like family and let you know everything is okay because we're so strong. But it's just a myth. I think it's a myth. I think it's interesting, going back to what you said about the protests that happened this summer, and everyone, I feel that so deeply, of things that I have been saying for years and getting in trouble for saying, right? When I was a student, and being a student who's gone to offices, luckily in my undergrad, I will say, I felt listened to. I then went to graduate school in North Carolina in the South, which was a whole different, culture shock. And I'm from Indiana and still going to school in North Carolina. Was a wildly different experience. And the way I was experienced was so shocking. Everything I did was angry. My face was angry. I was policed daily. I was like, if I listened to someone like this, and I'm a busty woman, I was told at least 6 times a day, please uncross your arms. It feels aggressive. It feels angry. And it's just truly a way that they police our bodies, because people are addicted to the image of this selfless, matronly woman. And so any opinion and actually anything that's happened to us, there are several reasons that human beings are angry and get angry. And we have access to that feeling because it protects us. It lets us know that something is happening to us. And I think, I think it really does come from people who aren't around, who don't grow up around women of color, seeing basically from Disney Channel to The Help to whatever, to they're used to seeing us as a bad. That's how all of the images that come through film and television come. It's like, oh, it's a sweet best friend Black girl from Ally McBeal. And then when we arrive in front of them and we actually have a problem, I liken it in my show I wrote, I was like, stubbing your toe on a chair and then cursing the chair. I was like, you had a misunderstanding that stemmed from your behavior and your addiction to what you think I should be. And when I step outside of that line, you can push me back into it by saying, you're an angry Black woman. It happened, it's happened I remember being in 5th grade and having my coat was broken. We're standing outside lining up in Indiana, and I crossed my arms and I was called to the office, and they're like, are we not moving fast enough for you, Miss Batteast? And I was like, what's happening? But I've just learned, truly, I was a 5th grader and I was cold and my coat was broken, and I pulled my coat together and I was sent to the office. So I learned early that it was a weapon. And I discuss Black women's anger now by discussing white fragility and fear of, like, why do you need that term? I've seen people in faculty meetings stand up and shout, name call, storm out, do everything, and never be called and never be labeled the angry white woman or white man in the way that I've dealt with that label. So I use my anger daily and joyfully because I trust that it is rational, because I'm a rational person and a kind person and an empathetic person. So if I'm angry, it's because I've been hurt. And people have said, well, do you know that what you said hurt someone? I was like, I do. I choose my words carefully. What they said, I understand what's happening. But I don't run from it, because I don't think it's real. I think people get angry. White, Black, brown, in between, men, women. I think it's so odd that we have turned that into a weapon specifically for Black women. People get angry. It's the only, I can't think of another term of like that has been used so effectively against us to silence us. And I'm not interested in silence. So I use it daily. I think of it as the sort of exposure therapy. get used to it. I'm gonna speak loud and I'm gonna do this and we're all gonna be okay.
And I think before Charmaine, I was going to say one thing. I think that just to go back, Didi, to what you were saying about numbered. I think that you know, in that moment that I had with my student, it was I had to explain to her that she might have to stand alone in that moment. Unfortunately, of course, I will be there from a distance to support her and do whatever I need to do. But in that moment, in that physical moment where she goes to the office and say what she has to say, she has to stand alone. And I think that really clicked in my brain when you said that being outnumbered is dangerous. I feel like, and that's why people, I feel like they're afraid to, because of those stereotypes of being the angry Black woman and the fear of using her voice. There's so many things going into your head before you can. So I think that it's like, when it comes to how we kind of create university settings or try to create diverse settings, it's like everyone is not coming in, like Charmaine said, with the same resources. People are coming in with different things. And that's where I think when it comes to how we can make things equitable, it's like we have to get into the community and say, hey, what does this specific community need? And what do they need? Maybe they don't need much as this, maybe they need more of this. And I think that that comes from the professors too, because in that moment, she realized that even speaking to her professors, they could not understand what she was going through. So does that mean we need to bring in people that are more equipped with how to handle sensitive matters as racism in a system, or does that mean that every teacher needs to be trained more? I think that there's so many things that are going through my head in that moment, and I think that it's very sad that she couldn't even get through the door without having to go through this whole mental thing before she can even say what she needs to say, which I think is disheartening to me. Yeah. So Charmaine, sorry, you can go ahead.
You know, I'm gonna just, before I comment about the answer to the question, my oldest daughter went to UC Santa Barbara and revived a 1960s protest for rights on campus for minority students, and ended up in negotiations and winning with the provost for a particular set of demands that became sort of an example for Ivy League universities around the country. And it's so interesting, like my daughter, like she's 24, and that kind of work is still being done and is still necessary today. And that example needs to still be shared. You know, even I'm hearing some of the stories that you're telling, Indya, and it's like some of these settings need an actual, you know, plan that can be executed for, there are plans there and we are not talking about something that's like equity, you know, the end of racism. None of this is insurmountable. None of these are unreasonable demands of humankind, you know. These are intelligent, you know, scientists in their respective fields, from the administrators all the way down to all the way up to the boards. These are intelligent beings and institutions. They can create solutions. What is the issue is power. How are we going to shift, and how is that going to feel when there is a shift in power? And a lot of these stereotypes and erasures and oppressions come from, you know, institutionalizing that, you know, structure to protect that power system. And of course, you know, the threat against that from the very, you know, mother figure that you've created is I think part of the issue. They're not going to let that happen, because this is the mother figure, and everyone does love. You know, and in the moment that Black women unite and rise and say or demand of humankind something, then it is over. So let's suppress that power as long and as much as we can, as much as possible. So, you know, in my work, I delve right into that oppression, that act of erasure, that act of violence against Black women, and by reviving and celebrating their power and their voice and stories in that space as an act against it, against that erasure. And I deal with things like, okay, so just because she has an apron on, you know, to the floor during enslavement, doesn't mean that she wasn't intelligent, or she wasn't the head of an institution called her family, or she wasn't the founder of a church that became a whole political structure. You know, we began to erase people just on, like you were saying, Dee, just their appearance. That all of that it's been happening through generations. And, you know, so with my work, I reclaim her narrative and I assert that. And I even explore, okay, so who's to say, you know, there wasn't resistance happening in the recipes, and why were certain people, you know, falling ill? Like, you know, like we weren't fighting, we were just passive all this time. No. So our resistance has always been present. Our anger has always been present, and how we asserted and exacted is actually the result of many of the institutions' success and progress that we've made thus far. It's just that we're not being acknowledged for it, you know. And another narrative is trying to push forward and surface, and it does play out in the power structures here. But trust that power is there, that anger is there, and we are wielding it. and I believe that, you know, that there's something happening now. You know, I think from creative spaces that is from an intersectional, you know, resistance that is, you know, gender bending and time bending. That is, you know, to me, it feels like, okay, how long are we going to continue to struggle? I want to see the result. So my anger is demanding, you know, freedom now. That's sort of the space that I'm in, and I'm feeling like, you know, many of us are as well. And it's what day it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Charmaine, you got into this. I think Nina Simone says this is, you know, art should always reflect the times, and I think that like we kind of hold time and space, and we kind of like we are the history books of it. That's why I enjoy music so much from the 60s and 70s and from artists in that era, because I really felt like they were so heavily wrapped into what was happening in society that it just shined through the music. And I feel like I can still step back in time when I play a song of that era, and I can really feel the emotions in that. So my question is, what is the why behind your work? And I know that Charmaine got to this, so I can have Dee Dee, but like answer this. But what is why is it that you feel like you have to do what you need to do, and have your work include these kind of topics that we're discussing?
I mean, my why, which sounds so hyperbolic, but it really isn't. My why is survival. I mean, it is survival. It's full, and survival as a full being, right? For me, and teaching other people who look like me, young women, and young women of color, to survive fully. And what that means, I think, because I work in acting, and so it's always like, okay, try to reach back and remember this, and there's a lot of internal body work and thinking about stuff, but just I think about all the ways that through my work I have shed expectations, and I have pushed against narratives that without this work I don't know how I would have done being an artist, right? I think about the little girl like trying to close her coat, and like somebody being like, oh, you know, Batteast, you have a problem. I think about silly things like, I remember being in like 7th grade, and the things that you do to yourself and that society does to you that you don't have language for. As an artist, you can find language for. I remember being in 7th grade and being afraid to wear like a gold necklace because they're like, oh, you know, those hood blacks wear gold, like whatever wild things that are put into your body that you don't know is there. That unless I'm an artist in which there's a space created where I can reach down and pull it out and comment on it. I mean, I could easily be a teacher. I identify deeply as an educator. But if I were just, and I love literature, so like if I were just an English teacher, I could write about it. But I do think doing my art, it's how I survive, and it's how I don't buy into these tropes. I don't flatten out two-dimensionally into an angry Black woman. People think I'm angry now. If you took my art, I'd be unrecognizable. I wouldn't have a way to express. So I think for me, it really is survival and teaching other people how to survive. I talk about in a piece I wrote, I was like, you know, why are gays and Blacks so loud? We're carving out undesignated space with sound to survive in. I think we are so Black women are so outside of the center of the narrative that is this American narrative, that anything that we do that is visible and more visible than perhaps a white counterpart feels intrusive. It feels like we're taking, any space that we take feels like we're taking too much space. And so with art, figuring out, it's such it feels like breathing to me when I can push out into spaces for myself and with other people, because intersectionality is important. If you got the energy to do it by yourself, you got the energy to bring somebody with you, whatever that somebody looks like. So for me, it does feel like survival, because like Charmaine said, I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of how long we got to struggle. I want to see the fruits of this labor. It feels like we've been laboring forever. So if I can make a piece on stage that looks inclusive, that looks like all the friends I had, I talk about, you know, theater is still very segregated. There's the Black plays, there's the white plays. I see my friends who've graduated, they've gone to the world. Black person, I click, that whole cast is Black or the whole cast is white. Or, you know, there's the gay plays, there's the straight plays. And so for me, it is survival, because if I can get my hands on a piece and pry it open, that has traditionally excluded anybody who looked like me or my friends or my queer family, and I can put all of us on stage together, then I can convince people who say, well, that's just the way the world is. They can look at it and enjoy it. Then they can see that actually that world is doable. It's far more interesting than the Saved by the Bell I grew up with. I mean, you know, so for me, it really does feel like survival. If I can make a world that looks like the world I want, I can wake up and keep building that world. You know, I have something to look forward to. If I have to wake up every day and go, this is just it, this world right now on CNN is what we get, I don't know how I survive that. I think there'd be a lot more self-medication, and I think I would just disappear. I think the world sometimes feels like it wants us to disappear, right? So making my work and making with other people makes me feel like I'm breathing in a world that truly daily, when I turn on the news, feels like suffocating to me. So it feels like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Charmaine, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, you know, I have all these things that go through my mind about my work and why. And I think that for me, I just want to mention that I'm in Africa. I'm in the Gambia. And for me as a Black woman, to be able to give time to my body, to be still and listen to my ancestral memories and stories resonate through my actual body is healing. And I've, at this moment, while that's happening, I'm painting self-portraits of me in prayer. And that is a prayer for what I'd like to see the world to be here forward. And you know, and specifically the end of white supremacy and oppression, and you know, what we're witnessing, violence against Black bodies. You know, that prayer is what I'm inside of, and so that's my why. But I'm doing that as an example, and I'm sharing it in a way that is I hope to bring others into that prayer and as a movement. And so my work is social justice work in that sense. But it's resistance. It really is resistance. But it's dope because it's the resistance that Dee Dee is talking about. It's actually the resistance against erasure, our right to live, our right to thrive, our right to breathe, rest, love, be, express,
if need be, yes.
and be sovereign and be safe.
Yeah.
Like the actual assertion of freedom. I keep using the word assertion because I consider it aggressive. Like, I deserve, like, at what point do we draw that line, that boundary? We end that oppression, so that violence. So that's my why.
I think I know after this conversation, I'm gonna be like, my brain is gonna be like turned out. I want to be a 3-hour thing. I'm like, let's ask this next. But I think just before we open up to ask questions and anybody that's viewing to type into the Q&A chat box. This whole series that I'm doing is all based off Audre Lorde and her theory of difference and creatively using difference. And I think that this is where we are right now. I think that we're very clear about the opposite, which is the destructive use of difference. I think we kind of have mastered that. I think now we're in a state where how can we all use and celebrate our differences? Because I think that initially, I think that it was kind of taught to look the same. I'm for sure, like when I was growing up and being a Black woman in the South or a Black child in the South, it was look the same. Talk like this. You'll fit in if you look like this. You'll fit in if your hair looks like this. You fit in if you fit this mold. And if you even how you speak, if you like watch what you say, how you say it, don't use too much slang, like in order to fit into this mode of perfection, you know what I mean, or white perfection, or whatever you need to do to get into a space. And I think to be quite blunt and frank, I did have an identity crisis where I didn't know who I was, because in so many spaces I had to always mute or kind of dumb down who I was and not really be able, especially in the dance space where I was the only Black student, a Black dancer in the ballet world. When I was first started dancing, I had to be something other, and be muted. And so I think that I think that that's kind of how I want to sum this up. It's like we must celebrate our differences. We must be able to speak openly about what's happening in the community and be honest and bring our uniqueness to the table, and for us to be able to again, like I say, be on the right side of history, if that makes sense. So I do want to open this up. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Dee Dee and Charmaine for speaking. I do want to ask, how, before we kind of wrap it up, I want to see if we have any questions. Yes, you can put them in the chat box now for our last kind of 4 or 5 minutes that we have. If anybody would like to ask anything to the panelists or have any feedback or anything like that before we can wrap it up. If you have any difficulty, you can type in the Q&A or in the chat box. We'll be able to see. Okay, someone asked, Mel asked, how do you proceed when you realize that you're in a harmful space? Wait, let's see, sorry. Let me go back up. How do you proceed when you realize that you're in a harmful space? How do you articulate those feelings? And Dee Dee, how do you think that you go about this?
I've done it in a range of ways. I think sometimes they come right out, like, but I think mostly you got to pick battles. You got to pick when and how you extend that energy and to whom. I- You know, the last 4 years have really shifted who I think I have to engage with, because you just can't. I mean, the last 4 years in America have been wild for people of color. So I have really, I have started to assert myself, to use Charmaine, to assert my right to not engage, right? And how, because I think when I was really young, I felt like I had to engage with everybody. I felt like I had to lead a march and I had to send an email and did it. And now I think, and it's interesting too, as a woman of color, people have been like, well, you can't, I mean, you know, if you aren't going to teach, then who's going to teach us? And I was like, read a book. Listen, man, I don't know. I don't know who will, but I think when I find myself in a harmful space, it's hard because I think as Black women, we understand, and I think it's going to sound hyperbolic to some people listening. Harmful spaces are part of our everyday life. You know, it's just, I was stuck in this, coming from my hometown, South Bend, and my twin brother and I, we live in a cul-de-sac in a pretty nice place, and he was trying to dig more out, and a car drove up beside us. We've lived in this house since I was 15, and it was 3 older white people, and they just sat there and idled, and they stared at us for like 4 minutes. And harmful space, I don't know if it was harmful, it was outside of my childhood home. And I think they were like, what are you guys doing? And so I think what I do is I continue on. I find people who I think are safe and I engage with them, but I refuse. As for years, it's taught me I don't engage with people who are not interested in the truth, but who are interested in maintaining an up. If I feel strongly that their interest is in upholding power structure and putting me in my place, I barrel on. I mean, I don't know how to answer that because I think every day I negotiate those. And sometimes I explode them. I remember once giving instruction to a student, we have feedback, and the student started to cry, and I was stopped by another person, and they were like, how dare you? And I think really what was happening was a reaction in their body of a Black woman who was making a white student cry. I wasn't doing anything wrong. We were giving feedback. And and I just shut down and I didn't speak. I waited until the student left the room, and I was like, never again interrupt me when I'm instructing a student. And it was a huge blowout, but it's like, I look back on it now and I go, I wouldn't do it again because it cost me more than it cost me so much. Like, it shifted who I was in a way. Like, there are ways in which I don't engage. There are ways in which I sit back and I think of all those stoic Black women who are our mothers and our aunties. And they're just, you know, I think of that phrase, uh-huh. And we all think it's funny now, but I was like, yeah, there's just women who've learned when to extend energy. I extend that energy now for students and for people who can't. If it's just about me, I'm going to be okay. I generally put my head down and keep it moving because the cost is great sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. I think that yeah, giving yourself permission to do that and not feel like you're obligated to do anything, like giving yourself permission to say, I'm going to insert myself into this, or I'm not going to insert myself into this, I think is powerful. I think and I know that you said you have to go because you have rehearsal. Is
Yeah,
that
I
correct?
told them I'd start 10 minutes late, so I got a good 9. I'm gonna sit still.
Yeah, a couple more questions.
I think Charmaine is coming back too. So
Yes, okay. And also
Yes.
Charmaine, yes, there she is. So we will, I want to going on. Okay, a question it says, as a budding artist that does not identify as a woman or as, what concrete things can we do to help the process, everyday things, and how do we find our place to help when our voices are not the ones to be heard?
I want to give Charmaine the opportunity to answer because I feel like I've been talking so long. Did she hear it?
Oh, I missed it too. I missed all your good stuff. Forgive my internet here.
Oh no, you're totally fine. Totally. Thank you so much for joining us right now. I mean, you're in a whole different space. I mean, content,
Time
everything.
zone.
Time zone.
Yeah. Practical things that someone could do in their space, where your voice. Okay, I think that what comes to mind is create your own space. Create your own spaces. I think that there's sort of a passive role that we've been assigned and we're accepting to. And I think that we need to sort of break that expectation and create our own space. Create spaces for dialogue and equity, but also create spaces where our voice can be heard to new audiences. Honestly, like even I have most of my career just sort of function out of the box, and once I figured out I don't have to fit in their box, I don't have to always be in their space, I don't have to always get curated into that show or whatever, that I have a voice, I have a following, I have a network, I have a narrative, my own narrative that I could put forward. And so that's what I would say. On a practical level, you can begin to just sort of control your own narrative, craft and your own spaces, and don't conform or limit yourself to their spaces or those spaces that don't want to include you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, affect change in those spaces too. Disrupt that as well. But I think it really helps on a practical level, and just on a creative practice, professional business, personal identity page to just understand your own power and agency and assert that yourself. Use that in the world for your own crafting your own narrative.
Yeah, I realized too that in the work that we're doing now and in the section in the dance film, and I'm realizing that self-identity is so important, and knowing and doing the work for yourself, and kind of breaking off the chains that we have in our mind of who we are or who we think we are based off other people's opinions or points of view.
Perceptions of it.
Yeah, that perception. I think that's the work that can be done, and then once you start being secure and establishing yourself, that I think then you can kind of be able to empathize and be able to go out into the community and say, hey, what's going on? You know what I mean? I think that's the internal work that people, I think, are some are not willing to do just yet. I think that's kind of why we're still feeling like it's okay to kind of fall into the norm and kind of let someone else tell you how to live your life and do things and kind of just be kind of brainwashed in that sense. And it's more work to stand alone and be able to kind of go against what is being kind of fed through the media and things like that, and be able to say, okay, I'm going to think for myself in this moment and uncover what really is being said, and kind of reading between the lines to find some truth or something that I can believe in, or something that seems, like I keep saying, is on the right side of history. Did you want to say anything?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, everything that you guys are saying, I totally identify with. I think of it as, because it's only hard and scary work once, I find. It feels like, if you've ever been in the ocean, you got to get out past the wake. I feel like once you get past it, once you stand up in a room by yourself, and you're going to have to be alone and do the thing, I think at least at the very least, what happens is the person that you did it with, who did not expect you to, who was asking you to suppress, don't that you can do that. They no longer push against you in the same way. And I feel like my work has continually been taking more space every day, just a little bit further out, because the idea is that we would all be in the space together versus siloed in our own things, and everybody knows your appropriate amount of space. But I do think, forging your own path, having the courage to go, I can't do this way. I can't do this. And saying that to people, I think you will surprise yourself. You have allies and allies who don't always look like us. But first, in order to find those allies, you got to chance some stuff. I think that's for women, for people of color, but you have to take a chance and go, I need to ask to do my work in this way. And I think you'll initially get some pushback, but if you trust that you're a rational human being who's operating from kindness and generosity, and you keep insisting that, people people learn. People learn the amount, you will occupy the amount of space that you designate for yourself, that you curate for yourself. And I think that's really important for women and really important for women of color to understand. Like, it is truly a goldfish moment of like, you can grow as large as you believe you can grow. And if that means leaving a job
Yeah.
or getting out of the country or saying, I actually can't create
Mhm.
this way, we just have to have the courage to do it. Because I think we often, specifically women of color, operate from a place of meagerness and desperation, and
Yes.
we try to stay in line because we've been taught we should be grateful and happy, and that anything outside of grateful and happy is angry. And so first confronting that and then start to push at those walls, I think they move easier than I think part of the constant everyday microaggressions, oppression and stuff is so that we don't figure out that there is no wizard and that these walls are movable, and that all you have to do is push at them a bit with some generosity and kindness, and as a good human, rational human being, that they will move. And that's, I think, what I want my students and women in particular, and women of color in particular, to know: push at the wall. And if the people who are that wall reject you, that's not the space you should be in. More often than not, I have found great allies when I push past that wall who go, I had no idea. And it's not in the service of educating them, it's in the service of making enough space for me to live fully. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much for both of you.
I'm going to thank you for this conversation. I'm going to go into my rehearsal space, but
Thank you so much.
It was so
Thank you
lovely
so much,
to meet you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Dee Dee.
Nice.
Nice
And
meeting
I
you.
just want to read two things. And Dee Dee, I know you have to leave, so thank you so much. But I do want to read two more meeting. When someone writes, I don't have any questions, but thank you for this. It makes me feel like I am not alone when it comes to these types of issues. And thank you so much for this discussion. As a Black student actor, I gained so much from hearing how other Black female artists have navigated the struggles I'm going through. Thank you for your truthfulness. And on that note, thank you also for tuning in and joining us for this very open and honest conversation with Dee Dee and India, Dee Dee and Charmaine. My name is there. I read my name.
Yeah, I hear you.
No, but Charmaine. And thank you so much, Aaron and PlySpace for putting this together. And everyone, please tune in next week for our next discussion that we're going to have. You can visit the PlySpace website to register. It's free, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you all so much again, Charmaine and Dee Dee. This has been so amazing. My brain is turning. I can't wait to get into rehearsal to debrief and just dive in even deeper into the work. So
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you, Charmaine. It was lovely to meet you.
All right, definitely, Dee Dee. All right, yes.
Thank you so much, everyone. And like India said, we've got another show next week. So I hope you can make it, and we'll talk more. And thank you for visiting with us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.